Hi everyone, welcome here. What's up? I hope you're all doing well. In times of physical distancing, or sometimes also called social distancing, I would like to share some ideas of what makes an interaction or conversation a way of coming close to someone and creating a sense of being together, rather than having the experience of a straining argument that drives you apart. We have less opportunities to be in physical proximity to our family and friends nowadays, and many people are relying on Skype and other technology to stay in contact. And this is very effective because staying connected is something that can really help cope with the way our lives have changed so dramatically. And in these connections, it's specifically important to get the real sense of a connection. Sometimes we can talk to someone and leave the conversation with the feeling that we never brought our world of experience together with their world of experience. We didn't really connect, and we don't know what was missing, if we just drifted apart or if one of us had a bad day, what was going on. Also, it is quite a change in family dynamics if we're suddenly spending so much time together when usually we have some hours apart from each other every day. Maybe you've also made this experience that many conflicts start when we're on vacation and start treating each other with less appreciation day after day. In this video, I would like to share some things that you can do to avoid this from happening and instead making this time of being physically distant a time for stronger social connection. Major conversation game changer number one: instead of trying to say a smart thing, pay more attention to listening. One thing that can go wrong in conversation is if we actually miss seeing the other person and listening to them because we're too focused on ourselves and our world. And the most common distraction is that we want to impress the other person by saying something smart. So what is way more important than trying to come off as smart or impressive is to pay attention to the other person, focus on what they're saying, listen to them, trying to find out why they are saying what they're saying, why this is moving them, and really diving into their world of experience and meeting them not only in our world of experience when we share, but also coming and meeting them in their world of experience when they are sharing. Spontaneously, those parts of the conversation where we're talking about something from our own world are more easy for us because we're already so invested into our own world. We know exactly what's going on, we know all the factors, and it doesn't take any energy to dive into this world because we're in it every single day. It actually takes more energy and resources to reconstruct in your mind the world of the other person, to understand what this world is made of, what major issues in this world are. So because it takes more resources, we might sometimes also just be lazy to really focus on the other person and what they're saying. And this is something that we really need to overcome in a conversation in order to experience this deep sense of connection. Research shows that we tend to drift to the notion that when we do something for ourselves, like buying a gift for ourselves, this will make us more happy than when we do something for someone else or buy a gift for someone else. And actually, it's the other way around. When this is tested, people are actually more happy when they bought a gift for someone else instead of buying something for themselves. So what is true for these physical gifts is also true for emotional and psychological gifts. If you give your time to someone, if you give them your ear, this will be much more satisfying in the conversation than if you only accept their gift of attention for talking about your own stuff. As a therapist, M. Scott Peck has said, true listening requires a setting aside of yourself. And the secret is that people will actually appreciate you much more if you listen to them rather than if you're someone who says one smart thing after the other. Now, what can you do concretely to make sure you're a good listener? And the first thing you can do is to just observe conversations and see how much of the time you're the one who's talking or dictating what the conversation is about. And if you notice that a lot of the time you're talking, or a lot of the time the conversation is revolving around your world, make sure that you give this space up for the other person also. Make sure to make room for the other person to share their thoughts, to share topics, to let them direct the flow of the conversation too. One of the best ways to do this actually is to ask questions. So when someone shares something, don't just go, huh? And then go back to your world. And then it's kind of like people are saying things at each other, but not really talking with each other. So when they said something, instead of replying, ask a question about what they shared. Ask them to elaborate. Ask them what it felt like for them. Because usually people talk about what they saw, not what they felt. So you can dive into emotions and experiences. And in this way, you're showing that you're interested and giving the person room to share their world with you, which they will gladly do. Another thing that's a really important part of being a good listener is to summarize what the other person said from time to time in your own words. And I know that this is something that you might have heard before, and it sounds, for some reason, for most people, it just sounds unbelievable. Many people don't want to try this out. They have doubts about this. It sounds like something mechanical. And the secret is to do it in a natural way. It can be as simple as, oh, it sounds like this was a situation for you that felt XYZ. Or so you're saying that XYZ. It's not meant to be like a protocol of what the other person said, like here, to prove that I was listening, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's more about deepening the conversation on those things that you're picking up, or just letting the other person feel back what they've just told you from what you've digested with this. And you can see that amazing depths will be reached in your conversations once you do this. So I can only recommend that you try this out with people you know very well. You feel comfortable with deepening the conversation by trying something new. And I can guarantee it will make all the difference. It's not a coincidence that this technique is called the Swiss pocket knife of communication, because in so many situations, this is exactly what is needed. Conversation game changer number 2. Instead of trying to convince the other person of something, share something personal. Some conversations can feel like you're having an argument the whole time, and they leave us feeling disconnected from each other and exhausted. This can happen when we try to convince the other person of something too much. When we have this impression that we need to get some results in this conversation, and that means either one of us will change their opinion or formulate some action plan or come to a new insight into their lives. Actually, this is a strain on the conversation. Conversations that are deep are much more about feeling what the other person is feeling, understanding what they're saying, and sharing, rather than getting someone somewhere. Check conversations if you often say things like, well, I think you're misjudging this, or I think you should understand that. I'm not saying that you can't express when you have a different opinion than the other person, but in some conversations, that's the only thing people do. Some people will even switch the side they're arguing for just to keep the argument going. And what they will miss is really deeply connecting to the other person. This way you can spend hours and days talking to the other person and then leaving that interaction feeling like you didn't spend a second with the other person. So the question is, what can you do to avoid these kind of arguments? One important thing that you can do is to express whenever you're agreeing with something the other person has shared. We often immediately jump to those 2% that we don't agree with and try to convince the other person of our view on those 2%. But the reality is that you're never going to find anyone who is in agreement with all the things that you think 100% of the time. And in this way, you can actually spend your whole life arguing with people instead of really connecting. So when the other person stopped sharing, Think about what resonated with you and then go into that instead of going into the part of the conversation that you don't resonate with. And what is even more important, share something personal. Take the conversation to a deeper level by leaving the surface of all these distant topics that you can argue about and going into experiences, things you saw, things you felt, things that happened to you, instead of random theoretical topics. Because that's usually also the simple truth behind the matter of these arguments, is that these topics are usually really far away from our personal life, from what's in here. So it takes some courage and vulnerability, or readiness to be vulnerable, to open up this inner world and start talking about that, instead of only staying on the surface and talking about all of these things that you can have so many opinions on, but they don't really affect your personal life and the interaction in that moment. And this readiness to be vulnerable and share needs to be there on both sides. Otherwise, the conversation can only go deep on one end. So sharing something personal is actually a way of letting other people come close to you. And conversation game changer number 3, slow your conversations down. We live in such a fast world, and this is also affecting our conversations. We jump from topic to topic, from person to person, from perspective to perspective, and this is another thing that adds to us talking at each other but not really connecting in conversations. One person may say, I'm looking for the car keys. Then the other person says, I have a meeting tomorrow. Then the other person again says, I'm thinking of buying this book. And you can see that they never really met. They were just talking at each other, jumping from topic to topic. So if you think about conversations you've had in the past that were really deep, I'm sure you'll find that those conversations were slower, that you remained longer on one experience or one topic before jumping to the next. So you can spend half an hour or more talking about an experience one person made. One person is sharing, the other person is listening, asking questions, and empathizing, and both are really going into this space, deeply into it, not just superficially and then switching to the next thing. So giving conversations and topics time allows you to really go into all aspects of an experience someone has made. And it allows both parties to pour their heart into the conversation and really connect and meet in that conversation. And this can't happen when we jump around too much, because by jumping around, we destroy the thread of the conversation. And especially if we want to go deep, deep is also delicate and requires delicacy. And once we jump out of a delicate moment in a conversation, it's really hard to find back to it. Of course, sometimes it can be fun to just be goofy and jump around from topic to topic or joke to joke in a conversation. But whenever we see someone that we haven't seen in a while and we really want to connect, slowing down the speed and eliminating distraction is key. Now, please also don't be too harsh on yourself or blame yourself if conversations don't go the way you would have liked them to go. Remember that having deep conversations is an art form, and most of us were never trained in it. So no wonder we need to practice it. And what better time to practice it than now, when we have to be so conscious about staying in contact, and then when we are in contact, really meeting in that conversation and really connecting on a deep level. And while we're on the subject of staying in contact, maybe you want to stay in contact with this channel, then hit the subscribe button and notification bell. And have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.